reason that I'm here is because the club is seeking change.
He said, well, whether you come or not, you're going to see a completely different Spurs team under me.
My hope and my desire and what I'm going to try and do is give our supporters hope and belief that we're going to embark on something special.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Asetka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 229, coming to you on a Monday following yet another Spurs defeat, Spurs Women defeat, all of it going on this weekend, but we're still rejoicing a little bit in some Europa League glory. I've got Caroline alongside. She is at CG Stefco. Caroline, how are you?
Feeling a little abandoned by our co-hosts who didn't want to talk about 2 losses. I don't know why not.
They don't want to talk about Nuno.
Yeah. Well, neither do I, to be fair.
We don't talk about Nuno. That's the way it goes. We are gonna have to unfortunately talk about Nuno because of course Spurs lose to Nottingham Forest, and this was such an interesting match to watch. We're gonna get into it, but man, the ride that Nuno Espirito Santo is on this year with Forest, my goodness, I'm just like, what the hell is this world? It is really, really bizarre. So,
and I honestly don't begrudge him because he had such a tough time at Spurs with a lot of things out of his control. So, good for him. I can't say I like the entirety of the Forest squad because Ryan Yates is on my shit list, but everyone else, go for it.
Yeah, I hear you. I hold no ill will toward Nuno. It wasn't, it was interesting listening to the broadcast, and I was reminded that he was only with Spurs for 10 matches, and 5 of them were wins. It is a little mind blowing when you think about it in that way. But just to be reminded of that while watching was, that was a little jarring. And here we are in 2025, just still plugging along and trying to figure it out. Look, before we get into the meat of the show today, I want to remind everyone to head on over to digitalspurs.com for your new Tottenham merch. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see Caroline and I are both rocking a Digital Spurs merch today. We're talking t-shirts, we're talking hoodies, crew necks, hats, so much more. We love the stuff that Danny has going on over at digitalspurs.com. Head on over to digitalspurs.com and let them know that we here at the Tottenham Depot sent you. Caroline, another defeat. It's the 18th of the Premier League season for Spurs, which is just absolutely incredible. I was doing a little bit of pod prep before we turned on the red light here and was realizing both the places that both Spurs men and women are in are so similar, where there's just nothing to play for in the league and they're not going to be relegated. By the way, that is official as of this weekend. Spurs men cannot be relegated from the league, thanks, weirdly enough, to Arsenal's victory over Ipswich Town. But that is officially done and dusted. I know Scott had been talking about it for a few weeks. We're not getting relegated. So, and I was always kind of looking at him like, yeah, I know, but technically there is a scenario. And when you look at the fixtures for the men also, there is a real possibility they don't win another match. I mean, it's certainly possible. So as of this weekend, though, we can officially say that is the case. But obviously, coming off of what happened Thursday in Frankfurt, this was going to be a little bit of a letdown, and we saw a little bit of a rotated lineup. What was your take, first of all, on the starting 11? Because I'll be honest, I just sat down and watched the game, didn't look ahead at a time at what the lineup was going to be, and I was kind of figuring out as I was going along and realizing what was happening, and I was kind of okay with it. I knew there was be some rotation, but what was your thoughts on the lineup first and foremost?
Yeah, I feel like there was maybe not as much rotation as I was expecting, the way Ange had kind of built up the game in his press conference. For example, Romero and Van de Ven both starting was a bit surprising to me, although as we know, they only ended up playing 45 minutes. But yeah, I
Which,
felt
by the way, if you're listening to this, that was planned. There were no injury concerns about that, but
yes.
Also just a strange decision not strange. I can get it to some extent, but also why risk them at all?
Right, because I feel like it's never a good thing to change both of your center backs mid-game. That's just going to throw things off. And I mean, I guess technically we didn't concede again after that, so it worked. But yeah, that really threw me at halftime. But anyway, I was glad to see Kulusevski get a start because obviously we need him to kind of, ramp up ahead of the Europa League fixtures. And this, gives Ange a chance to perhaps not start him in the next game and, give him like some limited minutes in that match just to be safe. But I was actually really excited to see this front three of Tell, Richarlison, and Odegaard because it does feel like those are three players who are probably amongst the most sort of intrinsically motivated of the squad right now because they have something to prove. Like they're still trying to cement their spot in the lineup. So I felt like we were going to see pretty good energy from them, and I think that pretty much bore out. Like I appreciated all of their performances to an extent. So yeah, it was. I don't know. It was just a strange lineup to kind of take in, and as the game started, it was like, oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know what we're doing here.
I want to double click on the wingers first, and then we'll work our way back. I totally agree with you. That front three was very interesting. Richarlison was everywhere in this match, which I would expect from Richarlison just because he's played so little football this season, and I would want to see him going out there and running around and doing Richarlison things, and he did some of that, which I appreciated. The wingers to me were awesome. I mean, they were Tell was getting space. They were a little erratic at times, but you kind of expect that from both of those two players, Tell and Odegaard, just in the way that they play. I don't think you're expecting as much creativity as they both provided in this match. And it seemed to me like part of the strategy, at least on the part of Spurs, knowing that Forest were going to sit deep, was to just get as wide as possible, use the creativity, and bang a bunch of crosses into the middle of the box and see what happens. Like it was very much a throw the spaghetti on the wall and hope it sticks type of scenario from the attacking standpoint.
Right. And Ange did actually confirm that in his post game that was the strategy, knowing the Forest were going to sit back. And I think that Richarlison as the striker was definitely well suited to this strategy. So that made sense. And, we saw him get, what was it, like 3 big chances, converted one of them. So, I mean, you can't really ask for too much more from this forward line. I feel like it was kind of everything behind it that did not always click for me. I don't know. I felt like the midfield did not really make a huge impact outside of Kulusevski. Like Sarr and Bentancur were kind of doing their own thing, which I feel like is a trend when they play together, which is why we have not seen it much this season.
Right. Well, and to that point about the wingers and the creativity coming from there, I feel like that's almost forced due to the midfield that is on the pitch. Like you're only going to get so much creativity from Kulusevski when he's got to do it all himself, especially from that true midfield role. When he's doing the creativity stuff out on the wing, it's way easier to see other stuff going on the pitch. But when he's got to be the center focus of it, especially with like we said, a front three that not only hasn't had a lot of game time together, but individually they haven't had a lot of game time at all. In fact, as I think about it, I can't actually remember the last time we got 90 minutes out of Richarlison in a match. And maybe someone in the comments can let me know. I didn't have a chance to look that up before we started recording, but that just is mind blowing that he even played 90 minutes. It's like, and it's something I appreciate. I'm not trying to even like dig on him. Like I appreciate it, but
I have fact checked. This is his only 90 minutes in the Premier League this season. So
there you go.
There you go.
Right. Well, this season, definitely. I'm thinking like even back, I can't remember the last time it actually happened. He's normally a guy that would come off in the 70th or 80th minute, even on a start. So awesome. Good for him. I love that he completed 90 minutes. Kudos. But going back to that midfield, yeah, like I totally agree with you. The Bentancur Sarr thing, they both, I can appreciate what they do in certain moments. Honestly, I thought when Bergvall came on, I was like, where's this been the entire match? Bergvall came on and look, Bergvall's done this a lot this season, has come on and just looked like he's running around with his hair on fire. But he really changed things up late in the match as well. I want to go to this back line thing though, because it's interesting, yes, Spurs conceded 2 goals in the first half when their 2 choice starting center backs were on the pitch. However, if you dig into the numbers, they actually were way better offensively and created way more, almost a half goal more in XG in the first half as compared to the second half when Kevin Danso and Ben Davis were the center backs. And that to me is the whole story of Ange Ball. Like that speaks the story of how they want to play. They had way more possession in the second half than they did the first as well, but it doesn't matter when you can't be creative and do anything with it. And speaking to that creativity, if it's not coming from the midfield and it's coming from inexperience up top, maybe sometimes it does have to come from the center backs. And that we saw a lot of that as well, which is like very, very strange. I mean, we saw Romero up in the box and making these attacking runs that he always does make from that position, as well as getting in on the action with the fullbacks, and Van de Ven kind of being the, the release valve, the safety, if you will, and with his pace able to run back. So I know on the surface to people, it's going to look like, well, they conceded 2 goals in the first half with their 2 best center backs on the pitch and none in the second half. But there's a wider story to be told, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. And part of that could be too that we were trying to get that first goal, and not put the game basically in Forest's hands as they hope to do because of their style.
Right.
We unfortunately, fell into their trap, and it was impossible to get out in the end. But yeah, I did feel like defensively, to me, that was the area of the pitch where I saw the most sort of, how do I want to phrase this, like visible holding back from the players, in the sense that it just didn't feel like we were going, full throated into tackles or clearances or anything in that first half. And I think that kind of changed as the game went on. And part of that was the personnel change to the players who we feel like are a little more defensive minded to begin with. But yeah, it did feel like, and I hate to pick on Porro because I think he had a pretty good game going forward, especially the cross for the goal. But it felt like his heart wasn't in it defensively in that first half for me. And this is like an inevitable consequence of knowing that these games in the league, don't count for much in the sense that we're safe from relegation. And I do feel like the team right now is more focused on regaining that attacking momentum. And from that perspective, it does feel like, the past week has been an improvement. But, unfortunately, we know defense sometimes wins games/championships. So I don't know. I feel like Ange, that's where he's really struggling the most right now, is kind of helping the team find that balance, because it's not balanced.
It certainly is not balanced. My favorite stat from this match, touches in opposition box. You ready for this one? You have any idea? Have you seen this number?
Well, it's funny because I have seen the stat that we had 48 crosses.
We had 45 touches in the Nottingham Forest box.
I was going to guess it was slightly less. That checks out.
Forest had 4. 45-4 in terms of touches in opposition box. That is remarkable for having not even gotten a point from this match.
Remarkably upsetting, I would say.
Yeah, no, there's no question about it. I mean, Spurs produced more than 2 goals of XG. Forest 0.64. Like, it's just this is what, and this kind of leads me to, I do want to talk about our beloved Italian goalkeeper, but before we get to that, I want to talk about Nuno for a second, because this is still, like, I know I mentioned it at the top, but like, this is still, it's sticking in my craw in a very strange way, because I'm sitting here watching this game today and I'm thinking, is this fun for anyone to be watching? Is this entertaining? If you're a Forest fan, and I know all the caveats in place, they're in 3rd place. They're likely going to make the Champions League. Because remember, you only got to be 5th. Like, there's still a little ways to go here, but like, they're playing that well. They are that good. They are that well drilled. They are that well coached. Defensively, they are stalwart. I mean, we saw it today. Spurs threw everything that they had at them, which some I know might say is not a lot, but like, they threw everything they had at them, and Forest did the double. Like, they in a very Nuno way. So is that fun for a Forest fan to watch? Because if you go back 3-4 years ago, Spurs fans were all bitching about watching this kind of football. And I'm not saying Nuno specifically, but this is this is Conte ball, this is Mourinho ball, this is Nuno ball. It's all of the same kind of mold as opposed to what we're getting now. I'm sitting here scratching my head wondering what did I miss? Like, I thought this expansive brand of football was supposed to be able to do something. Is it just something that doesn't play in the Premier League anymore in this day and age? I don't know. I'm asking all of these. I'm throwing out all these questions very rhetorically to you, but feel free to because how are you feeling about this? I'm so baffled by it.
Well, I have another question to add to all of your questions, but I'll start by saying I don't think it's probably fun for them in the sense of actually watching the games, the Forest fans, but I think they're feeling pretty thrilled about the prospect of European football because that is obviously something they have not had in a long, long time. So fair play. The thing is, when Nuno was at Spurs, I think we all sensed that the style of play was not sustainable. And from that aspect, it was not fun to know that it was going to come crashing down. My question is, why is it working better at Forest than it did at Spurs? Because I don't, like, on paper, I don't believe that the squad he has at his disposal is any better than what he had at Spurs. I mean, is that unfair?
I think it's comparable, and I think that's the thing. When you throw together a squad, like, they have some very good players, but also a lot of experienced Premier League players, and that's a big part of it. I think Spurs have somewhat lacked in that in recent years. But even if you look at the squads that that Mourinho and Conte had in the aftermath of all of this, it's like that can be done with a certain structure in place, and Spurs have just never had the I'm going to continue to think it's the structure and the whole thing, the up and down, the recruiting, the coaching, the training staff, the medical staff, like all of it I want to throw in. But like, it's just, I'm so curious as to how Spurs fans are feeling watching this, because I know my feelings on it are complicated. Because if I was rooting for Forest today, watching that match, I would be delighted with the victory, delighted that we're in third place, delighted that we're probably going to have European, all the things, like all the things that we were saying when Nuno was and Conte and Mourinho were here, were I don't care what it looks like as long as it's wins. Like, that's what most of us were saying. And others were saying, well, it's boring as all sin. Why would I want to sit and watch this? And watching Forest today, to me, was boring as all sin, but they won, and they're having what is called success. And I'm not even trying to take anything away from them by saying that. Like, they're very successful. They're having a great season. Credit to them. But that was, for the neutral, maybe it was somewhat exciting just because it's two teams going back and forth and you've got a counterattacking element. But like, if I'm a Forest fan, that was a boring watch. I'm a Spurs fan, and it was a boring watch because I didn't really believe we were getting that second goal late in the match.
Well, and to tie it back to Spurs, I feel like I've been asking similar questions about our season, in the sense that, earlier when we were kind of in the pits of the injury crisis, despair, and, the results were kind of the same as they are right now, but at least we were still playing that sort of visible Ange ball, identity ball. And so I could swallow those losses a little better than I think I have been lately. And even in, the past game against Frankfurt that got us to a European semifinal, which I'm obviously happy about, there was still a part of me that was feeling concern about the way we did it. Because right. I don't know. For me, I just don't feel like that's the football that's going to win the final if we get to it. So I don't know. I feel conflicted about it. And, it's tough because, especially, and just someone who obviously prides himself on sticking to his, footballing principles. And it does feel like he's drifting a little bit away from that in recent weeks. So I don't really know how that's going to work long term.
Is he drifting, or is he learning? I mean, that's what I'm curious about too.
It's a fair question. Yeah.
We talked about how wide they played in this match. I mean, I was kind of surprised that when Solanke came onto the pitch, that Richarlison wasn't the one coming off. The fact that he played Solanke and Richarlison basically as dual strikers, but also with two wide men. They were at one point they were practically playing a 4-2-4 and just getting as wide as they could up top to attack with. and sending the fullbacks up there as well. And the two midfielders were just kind of chilling until Bergvall came on. There was that stretch of the match where they were literally just chilling with two midfielders and kind of letting them sit and collect the balls that were getting thrown out to them and get them back to the literal 4 attackers that they had on, as well as the fullbacks up there. It was, I don't know, maybe changes are happening and we're just, I don't pretend to be like the tactical genius to be able to see all this stuff. But when I saw that today, I was like, okay, something's different here. This is weird. Why is this not look the same? And when you look at it, it's like he tried something and it kind of in some ways worked. Like, I know it didn't work on the scoreline, but in some ways it kind of worked.
Well, and I feel like I am somewhat willing to entertain this kind of strategy on a temporary basis, as long as it gets us to our goal, which is that final, because
you can deal with it for another 2 weeks max.
Yeah, exactly. And, I've accepted that these next two, well, now one more Premier League game before the Europa League starts back up, we're just getting through these games the best we can. Like, the goal is not necessarily to win. It's to work on things. It's to keep players in the, perfect equilibrium of fitness, which is very difficult to do. So I'm sympathetic, honestly, to Ange's team selection dilemmas and how he's managing the games in game. Like, I understand he's in a very difficult position. So I think I'm just curious to see, kind of like you alluded to, is this going to be things that he takes on and applies next season if he is still in charge, or are we going to go back to like old Ange? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and I think that a lot of that depends on obviously the result in the Europa League and whether it even is Ange, number one, and number two, if it does happen to be Ange going into the summer, no matter what, it's going to depend on the backing that he gets and how he wants to build things, dependent on obviously what the fixture list is going to look like next year.
Right, that too. But that does go back to what you were saying about Forest in terms of their recruitment. Obviously we know they may have stretched some rules along the way to assemble this squad, but I do think they've been successful in the sense that, like you said, they brought in experience, and not just players who have Premier League experience, but I think from other leagues as well. So it's not like Nuno is working with a bunch of clowns the way he might have if he had been at Forest a few seasons ago. Maybe that's harsh. But
or the way he probably was at Spurs for the 10 games that he was in charge as well.
it would appear so.
Do you want to talk briefly about our beautiful Italian boy in between the pipes? Because whoa, baby, the questions are going to continue to come. My goodness,
I'm going to cut you off because I was thinking about this earlier, and I feel like his steadiness in the Europa League game kind of went overlooked.
Oh,
and that's very much like a keeper problem in general. When they play well, they don't always get the credit unless they're making some world-class save. So there's that. I do agree he did not look good today. And part of me feels like it's down to this sort of weird situation that all the players are in, where they're subconsciously or not holding something back for those Europa League games. Because I don't think he was the only one on the pitch doing that today, frankly. But it's still true that he cost us. I think it was the second goal. He definitely should have saved. And it's
or just made a different decision not to come out there.
Right? Yeah, he didn't need to come out exactly.
And not to cut you off, but that's the problem I'm having is the decision making at this point. It's not like there's still shot stopping happening. There's still he has the ability to play out the back, probably not as well as his backup, but he has that. He's shown that ability to do it in this system, and it's the decision making for me recently where I'm just like, whoa, what's gotten into you, kind of thing.
Well, and this may be a bold shout, but that's kind of why I feel it might have been better for Ange to give this game to Kinski, because I think keepers, it's a very different job, but I think he might have benefited from that sort of mental break that some of the other players have been getting with the rotation.
Sure.
And we don't always think about keepers needing rotation, but I think that is part of it, the mental aspect. So it's too late now, but I would have liked to see it. and I'm sure Kinski would have liked to play.
Well, sure. And could you imagine Kinski like getting a chance? Oh, here's a home match against a team that sits third in the league. Like, let's go get it. Like Kinski would probably be really amped up for that. And then you can bring Vicario back for the match at Anfield next week ahead
Right.
of Europa League. I didn't hate the shout. I think the problem for me with Vicario right now too is that, like, you're right. On Thursday against Frankfurt, he was brilliant. He was outstanding, and it was kind of unheralded, which is fine. Like that's the mantra. Like, you're not going to always get the credit you deserve, but like, that's the one. And like, he wasn't great in the first leg against Frankfurt, I don't think. And like, for me right now, we're getting 1 to 1.5 out of every 4 or 5 matches are brilliant from him. And that's just not consistent enough. So like, I'm not calling for him or anything. Like, I'm not saying you got to make a switch, but like, man, it's the decision making. It comes down to that. It's why did you do what you just did? It's erratic at times, which is like my least favorite trait of a goalkeeper. So it's freaking me out a little bit. I'll put that out there. I'm kind of back to both of our goalkeepers this season have freaked me out at one point or another, and we haven't even seen like a ton of Kinski, but he obviously started those first few matches that he came in and was brilliant, and then he got a little like, whoa, man, what are you doing? So something must be in the water. I don't know. The goalkeepers are just really, really freaking me out. So, but yeah, I'd like to see the form increase. I mean, and the scary part is you only got one match to show me something before the match that really counts, and it's at Anfield, where, if you hadn't noticed, Liverpool are about to clinch the Premier League title. So that's not going to be a raucous atmosphere.
Yeah, I feel like we need to talk about that because it's certainly not ideal that that is the game we have right before what I would say is the most important game in our tie with the Norwegian team, whose name I have not learned how to pronounce.
Bode?
Glint? I don't know. But the point is, we have to win that home leg because we know it's going to be a difficult environment in Norway with their artificial turf. Similar to what we saw with Tamworth in the FA Cup. I don't want to have to go there scoring multiple goals. Let's put it that way. So it doesn't feel great for morale that we're going to be going to Anfield and possibly, allowing Liverpool to clinch the title. I know we were talking about it before recording, and neither of us feel particularly confident that we can win this game. But it's not just this particular context of this season. It's every season that's a difficult fixture going to Anfield. It just is.
Sure.
And, I just feel like the environment of their fans willing them to that, title clinching is going to be very difficult to overcome. But We'll see.
Well, you mentioned Bodo. They are going to be without 3 starters for that first leg, including their captain, Patrick Berg, who is like their everyman. So that is the time. Like, you've got to win that match, probably 4-0, 5-1, something like that. Like, build yourself a cushion because you're going to have to go to Norway the following week on a plastic pitch where it's probably going to be colder than anything, just because that's what it does in that part of the world. And so that's the time to do it. So that's good. And if you weren't aware, Liverpool with a win on Sunday over Spurs would clinch the Premier League title. And that's, like I said, going to be a raucous environment. There's no other way to put it.
Well, and the other thing is, since Ange did play a lot of who we presume will be starters for the Europa League game, you have to imagine they're not going to be starting this game against Liverpool. They're going to be rested. Like we said, possibly get some minutes in the second half, but I don't think we're going to be starting with our strongest team. So this is just going to be another situation of, are the quote unquote backups going to step up? And at times this season they haven't. So I don't know.
Maybe Palace will just beat Arsenal on Wednesday, and we won't have to worry about it. The title will already be clinched. That would be a really nice gift from Crystal Palace. I would
Who
be
famously love to do Spurs favors. Not.
Speaking of favors, do me a favor and tell me, what the hell are we doing with Spurs Women at this point? Just another just backbreaker of a defeat in this one. I mean, at least there are some interesting, fun things to talk about from this game. But my goodness, a 3-2 defeat on Sunday at home to Aston Villa, a stoppage time winner. it's 8 straight now in all comps without
Mhm.
a victory for Spurs. Take me through this one. I can't anymore. Like it's very Ella Morris, congrats. Like that's all I want to say. Like I'm on board with all that. I love everything about it, but man, this was frustrating.
It was. At the same time, I am just happy to see some signs of life from this team because,
Sure.
especially coming off a 3-week break, I was very concerned about how this game was going to go, especially considering that Aston Villa were, relegation threatened. And I have not done the math. I think they might still not be safe, but it's getting close. So they're going to be very happy with this result. But I felt like there were some signs of improvement. We still have the issue of always conceding first. I actually looked and we have conceded the first goal of the game. I think it was going back all the way even into December. So that is concerning. Um, we also just keep giving up kind of very similar goals. The one exception was the actual literal first goal in this game. I felt like that one was fully on Lisa Kopp, not having the awareness of the ball coming back down after hitting the crossbar. That was to me just like, seriously.
Yeah, you want to talk about goalkeeper mistakes, like
Exactly. It was all around the Tottenham sphere this weekend. But after that, it did get better. And I felt like the team put in a really decent comeback effort. We did not complete the job, unfortunately. But, kind of like we were talking about with the men's team, the winger play being a lot better than we've seen. I thought it was the same with the women's game as well. Like Jess Naz looked very lively. She was consistently beating her player. And then obviously Ella Morris is the fullback, but she's one who's very willing to do those sort of overlapping runs. So at times she was functioning as a winger, and I mean I just can't say enough good things about Ella Morris. Honestly, I feel like she is sort of the future of the team. Honestly, and just her attitude, everything I've read about her and heard from her, that's the kind of player that you want to be building around. I feel like. And she was, kind of involved in both goals. She didn't get a direct assist for Jess's goal, but she sort of flicked it on to the Villa player that then deflected it. So, yeah, she barely put a foot wrong in this game, I felt like. So there were good things. It's just giving up that late goal is very like sort of old Spurs women, the kind of thing we're trying to get away from. And I don't know. I don't feel like, although there were some players who I was feeling better about after this game, I don't think it made me feel any better about Robert Villaham's position. Did you feel the same?
Uh, I don't really feel much different about any of that, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm a little bit in the same holding pattern that I am on the other side. It's just like I want to see something that I'm not seeing, and I don't know that it's going to be there. It's like there's a mirage out there. Maybe I'll see it, but how much longer do I want to wait to see if this is going to come along or not? By the way, quickly, I did fact check the table. Palace still 7 points back of both Villa and Leicester City at this point, but they do have the game in hand, although it's against Chelsea. They play Chelsea at midweek this week. So Palace can still technically dig themselves out of the relegation places, but it is going to be an uphill climb for sure. So, but I want to go back to Morris real quick because that's become basically the story of the season to me. With this team, I don't really know that there is another angle at this point, just because it would normally be someone like Beth England or Martha Thomas or their contributions, but like they've played so few and far between and haven't really at any point gotten going due to injury and the like. I'm happy that there's at least something that we can pull from a season that has had no run to a cup final and had no first victory over Arsenal to come by. Like it's it feels way worse than last season for those reasons, but at the same time you can find those silver linings. And if it does come down to there's going to be a managerial change here, at least we can oh gosh, I'm about to say hope, but at least we can hope that this club will have something to build around here and will invest in it. We talked a few weeks back about the new CEO coming in and the job that he did building Arsenal's women's team into what it is now. And like, there are building blocks here that you can see. But it definitely just as a whole, I mean, there's 3 matches left all of a sudden. Like it's felt like this season has kind of ground to a halt because over the last couple of months, the team has not been playing that often. And then I look up and all of a sudden there's only one home fixture left. It is at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which is nice. And two trips to Merseyside to play Liverpool this week and Everton to close the season. And it's like, okay, that's it. That's all we're gonna get now. I don't know. The Villaham thing to me though is the big question. It's like I said, it's the big question hanging over the men's team. It's the big question hanging over the women's team, and I'll be interested to see kind of how it all plays out. But obviously, there's not a lot of time for it to do so.
No, and just you reading off our remaining fixture list, I feel like it's possible we go the rest of the season without a point. And I hate to be pessimistic, but it just feels like that could happen because we do not typically play well in the city of Liverpool historically. No. And then Chelsea is Chelsea. Even if we've got the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium support behind us, that's still a big ask. Which it might be even bigger if they're knocked out of the Champions League and have nothing to play for, outside of the league. But yeah, the other big question I have with the women's team is, did we learn a lesson about release clauses and make sure that was not in Ella Morris's contract? That might have happened before the Celine betrayal, however, so it may have been too late. We'll see. But like, legitimately, this is a player who's being talked about as, a future lioness, someone we absolutely need to hold on to. So I hope the club has planned for that appropriately. But yeah, it's just getting to be the point where these games don't matter result wise, but we would like to still see maybe some of the team identity coming back to the fore. And whether Robert Villaham's going to be leading that next season, we don't know. But I hope that the players can kind of rally and get some belief back, I guess.
Yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice. Man, Morris just pops on the pitch too. That's the other thing. Like, you just brought it up again. Like, yeah, that's the kind of player you want to be able to. If you haven't got a chance to like sit down and watch a whole Spurs women matches, just watch for Morris. Just watch her the entire time because she's one of those players that really pops, and I'm glad that she's getting her shine. But you just like everything you just brought up about release clauses has me with that pit in my stomach again.
Well, and part of the reason I think she stands out in this squad is her physicality, which is something that we've not always been able to say about our players. A lot of times, we're beaten to balls too easily. We don't have the pace, but I feel like she combines all of those elements with really strong technical skill, really, high football IQ, to use a cliche. So yeah, I do feel like that's the one silver lining for sure from this season.
Well, as you said, 3 matches left for that to play out. The men don't have many more in the league either. Like, we're getting down to the business end of the season here, and we are gonna carry you right through to whatever happens the rest of the way. As we move to wrap here, be sure to check out our episodes on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. You can also leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice to help spread the word about the show. And you can follow us on the socials at Tottenham Depot. We're going to be back Sunday. Of course, 2 matches against Liverpool, both for the men and women, both away. So that should be I'm sure that'll all go swimmingly. And we'll probably be talking about a Premier League title being decided at that point and looking ahead in Europe for the men for what should hopefully be a simple, easy Thursday with 5 goals in the back of the net. I'm sure that's exactly how it'll play out. It'll go swimmingly. We will be back next week, hopefully on a more normal schedule now. Spurs really threw us off with this Thursday, Monday thing, but we're trying to get the pods out to you folks and give you something to listen to in the meantime. So until next Sunday, this has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. As always, come on, you Spurs.